Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really getting down to basics. We're tackling the cell.
Yep, the fundamental unit.
It sounds simple, maybe, but it's pretty complex, right? Cell tissue characteristics. But we promise we'll make it fast, clear, and, organized. The essentials for pathophysiology.
Absolutely. Our mission really is, well, if you want to understand disease, you have to start here, at the cell, how it works normally.
Okay.
So this deep dive, it's like a map. We'll look inside the eukaryotic cell, the nucleus with the DNA, then the organelles doing the work, making energy.
Factories and power plants.
Exactly. And how cells talk, how they move stuff, and then how they group together to form the body's main tissues. It's the foundation.
Right. Laying the groundwork for everything else in pathology. So starting deep inside, then the surface and signals, then the bigger picture of tissues. Let's jump in. Protoplasm. What is that exactly?
So protoplasm is basically everything inside the cell membrane. It's mostly water, like you said, maybe 70 to 85%.
Wow, mostly water.
Yeah, but dissolved in that water are the really important things.
Yeah.
Proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, and crucially, electrolytes. And the balance is key.
Balance how?
Well, potassium and magnesium are kept at high concentrations inside the cell in the cytoplasm,
Okay.
while sodium, chloride, and calcium are kept high outside the cell. That difference, that imbalance, that's potential energy the cell uses later.
Ah, okay, like a battery.
Oh, yeah.
And the cytoplasm, that's where the organelles are, the little organs. But the nucleus is the boss, right?
Definitely the control center. It holds the DNA. I mean, all the genetic blueprints for every single protein the cell needs.
So how does it get those instructions out?
Through a process called transcription. It basically copies a segment of DNA, a gene, into a messenger RNA molecule, or mRNA.
And that mRNA then leaves the nucleus.
Exactly. It travels out into the cytoplasm to find the ribosomes, which are the protein synthesis factories.
Okay, so mRNA arrives at the ribosome. Now what?
Now we get translation. Another type of RNA, transfer RNA or tRNA, reads the mRNA code. And each tRNA molecule carries a specific amino acid. So it matches the code on the mRNA and adds its amino acid to the growing protein chain. It's like an assembly line.
A very precise assembly line.
Mm-hmm.
And the endoplasmic reticulum, the ER, that's involved too.
Yeah, the ER is sort of the next step, like the finishing and shipping department. There are two types. Rough ER. Well, it looks rough because it's studded with ribosomes.
Makes sense.
It mainly processes proteins that are going to be secreted out of the cell, like hormones. Insulin is a great example. Or proteins that get embedded in the cell membranes.
And the smooth ER, no ribosomes.
Correct. Smooth ER focuses on synthesizing lipids, steroid hormones, and in the liver, it's super important for detoxifying drugs and storing glycogen.
And you mentioned disease links here. ER stress.
Right. If the protein folding demand gets too high, if the ER gets overwhelmed, you get ER stress. And yeah, the source material links this to things like inflammatory bowel disease, maybe even some types of diabetes. It's basically the factory getting overworked and causing problems downstream.
Interesting. So after the ER, where do things go?
To the Golgi complex, or Golgi apparatus. It receives proteins and lipids from the ER, modifies them further, sorts them, and packages them into vesicles. Little bubbles, basically.
For shipping out?
Yeah, for secretion or maybe delivery to another organelle. It's also a target. Some toxins, like Shiga toxin or ricin, actually hijack the Golgi's transport system to sneak into the cell.
Wow. Okay, now what about cleanup? Cell waste.
That's the job of the lysosomes. Think of them as the cell's recycling center or stomach. They're filled with powerful digestive enzymes.
Digestive enzymes need special conditions.
Definitely. They only work properly in a very acidic environment around pH 5.0, which is much lower than the rest of the cytoplasm.
And they digest what?
Two main things. Heterophagy is digesting stuff brought in from outside, like bacteria engulfed by immune cells. Autophagy is breaking down the cell's own old or damaged organelles, self-cleaning.
And if this goes wrong, Tay-Sachs disease.
Exactly. A tragic example. In Tay-Sachs, there's a missing lysosomal enzyme, hexaminidase A. So a specific lipid GM2 ganglioside can't be broken down. It just builds up and up, especially in nerve cells, and it's toxic. Causes severe neurological damage.
A direct link between organelle function and disease. What about peroxisomes?
Peroxisomes are also cleanup crew, but they specialize in breaking down fatty acids and, importantly, neutralizing harmful reactive oxygen species, like hydrogen peroxide. They help control free radical damage.
Okay. And powering all this activity, The mitochondria.
The power plants, absolutely essential. They generate most of the cell's ATP, the energy currency.
To cellular respiration, right, which needs oxygen.
Correct, aerobic respiration. But what's really fascinating about mitochondria is they do more than just make energy. They're key regulators of apoptosis.
Programmed cell death.
Exactly. They can initiate the process when a cell is damaged or no longer needed.
So problems here could mean what? Cancer? Neurodegeneration?
Both. If they fail to trigger apoptosis in damaged cells, that can let potentially cancerous cells survive and proliferate. On the other hand, if they trigger too much apoptosis, that's linked to neurodegenerative diseases where you see excessive neuron death. And remember, they have their own DNA, mtDNA, inherited only from the mother.
That is unique. Okay, let's shift focus to the edge, the cell membrane. It does more than just hold things in, right?
Oh, much more. 4 key things. It's a selective barrier. It holds receptors for communication, it has transporters to move things in and out, and it helps regulate cell growth and division.
And structurally, it's that lipid bilayer.
Yep, a fluid, dynamic lipid bilayer, mostly phospholipids. They have hydrophilic heads, water-loving, facing outwards and inwards towards the watery environment.
Round tails.
Hydrophobic, water-hating tails, tucked away inside, forming a nonpolar core. That core is why fatty things, lipid-soluble substances like alcohol, steroid hormones, some drugs can just diffuse right through.
But water-soluble things, ions, glucose, they need help.
They need proteins. Membrane proteins do most of the transport and signaling work. You have transmembrane or integral proteins that span the entire membrane.
It's like channels and carriers.
Exactly. Ion channels, carrier proteins, and special water channels called aquaporins. Mutations in these channels cause channelopathies. Cystic fibrosis is the classic example of faulty chloride channel.
Okay, and the other type, peripheral proteins.
Peripheral proteins are more loosely attached, just bound to one surface, often temporarily. They're frequently involved in cell signaling pathways or anchoring the cytoskeleton.
Let's talk about that signaling. How do cells communicate?
Mainly through chemical signals. There are 4 main types based on distance. Autocrine signaling is a cell talking to itself.
A self-talk. Yeah.
Paracrine is signaling nearby cells. Endocrine uses hormones released into the bloodstream to reach distant targets. And synaptic signaling is specific to nerve cells using neurotransmitters across a synapse.
And the cell can adjust how sensitive it is to these signals, upregulation, downregulation.
Yeah, it's a smart system. If a signal, the ligand, is around too much, the cell might reduce the number of active receptors for it. That's that downregulation, makes it less sensitive. If a signal is scarce, it might increase the number of receptors. Upregulation, making it more sensitive. The whole process of the signal binding and causing an effect inside is called signal transduction.
And there are different types of receptors doing this.
3 main classes on the cell surface. The biggest group is G protein-linked receptors. They use these intermediary proteins, G proteins.
Like switches.
Kind of like molecular switches, yeah. When activated, they often trigger the production of internal messengers, called second messengers, like cyclic AMP, CMMP.
Okay, what else?
Then you have enzyme-linked receptors. Many of these have intrinsic enzyme activity, often tyrosine kinase activity. Think insulin receptors, growth factor receptors.
Important for growth.
Very. And finally, ion channel-linked receptors. These are basically gates that open or close when a specific ligand, like a neurotransmitter, binds. They allow for really rapid signaling, crucial in nerves and muscles.
Got it. Okay. Let's switch gears to energy. Metabolism.
Right. Metabolism is the sum of all chemical processes. 2 sides to it. Catabolism is breaking down molecules, usually to release energy.
Like breaking down glucose.
Exactly. And anabolism is building up complex molecules from simpler ones, which usually requires energy.
And the energy currency is ATP.
Adenosine triphosphate, ATP. It stores energy in those high-energy phosphate bonds. Breaking those bonds releases the energy the cell needs.
So how does the cell make ATP? You mentioned anaerobic and aerobic paths.
Right. The first stage, common to both, is glycolysis. It happens in the cytoplasm and doesn't need oxygen, so it's anaerobic.
Yeah.
It takes 1 molecule of glucose and splits it into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, or pyruvate. The net energy gain is small, though only 2 ATP molecules.
Just 2. That's not much.
Not much at all.
Yeah.
And if oxygen isn't available, say during intense exercise or shock,
Yeah.
that pyruvic acid gets converted into lactic acid. This allows glycolysis to continue making that small amount of ATP, but lactic acid buildup can cause problems.
Right. Muscle burn, acidosis.
Yeah.
But if oxygen is available,
Then things get much more efficient. That pyruvic acid moves into the mitochondria for aerobic metabolism.
Inside the power plant.
Exactly. It enters the citric acid cycle, also called the Krebs cycle, and then the electron transport chain, which involves oxidative phosphorylation.
And the payoff.
Huge difference. From that one starting glucose molecule, aerobic metabolism yields around 36 ATP molecules. Way more efficient.
36 versus 2. Big difference.
Massive. And the waste products are just carbon dioxide and water. Much cleaner.
Efficiency matters.
Mm.
Okay, so the cell needs to move things across its membrane too. Let's talk transport. Passive first. No energy needed.
Right. Passive transport relies on concentration gradients moving from high concentration to low. Simple diffusion is for small lipid-soluble things like oxygen, CO2, alcohol. They just slip through the lipid bilayer.
Easy enough. What about bigger things or charged things?
They need help. Facilitated diffusion still moves down the gradient, so no ATP needed, but it requires a membrane protein, either a channel or a carrier. Glucose transport into many cells works this way, often helped by insulin.
Okay. And osmosis. That's just water.
Specifically water diffusion. Water moves across the membrane, usually through those aquaporin channels, from an area where water is more concentrated, meaning lower solute concentration, to an area where water is less concentrated, higher solute concentration, driven by osmotic pressure.
Got it. Now, active transport. This costs energy.
Yes, because you're moving substances against their concentration gradient. Uphill, basically. It requires ATP.
And the main example is?
The sodium-potassium pump, the Neyman plus K plus ATPase pump. This is primary active transport because it uses ATP directly.
What does it do again?
It pumps 3 sodium ions out of the cell and brings 2 potassium ions in for every ATP molecule it burns.
Crucial for maintaining those ion gradients we talked about earlier.
Absolutely essential. It maintains the cell volume, the electrical potential. If this pump fails, sodium builds up inside, water follows by osmosis, the cell swells and can eventually burst. Very bad.
Definitely sounds critical.
Yeah.
What about secondary active transport?
This is clever. It uses the energy stored in the sodium gradient that the main pump created.
Oh.
As sodium diffuses back into the cell down its steep gradient, the energy released is used to pull another substance along with it, even against its gradient.
Piggybacking.
Pretty much.
Oh.
If both substances move in the same direction, it's cotransport or symport,
Yeah.
like how glucose is absorbed in the intestines along with sodium.
Okay.
If they move in opposite directions, sodium comes in, something else goes out. It's countertransport or antiport.
Right. Complex systems. Okay, one more big topic before tissues. The cell's electrical life. Membrane potentials.
Yeah, this comes directly from those ion gradients maintained by the pump. You have more positive charges outside, Na+, say 2+, and more positive charges inside, K+, but also large negatively charged proteins inside. The net result is the inside is negative relative to the outside.
And that's the resting membrane potential, RMP.
Exactly. It's the voltage difference across the membrane when the cell is at rest or polarized. It's mostly due to potassium ions tending to leak out down their gradient, making the inside negative, and the Na plus K plus pump constantly working to maintain the separation.
What happens when it's not at rest? When it's stimulated?
The potential changes. Depolarization means the inside becomes less negative, moving towards zero, or even becoming positive. This usually happens when channels open, letting positive ions like sodium or calcium rush in.
Okay, less negative.
Hyperpolarization is the opposite. The inside becomes even more negative than resting potential, often caused by chloride ions rushing in or more potassium rushing out.
And repolarization.
That's just returning back to the resting membrane potential after a depolarization event.
And the action potential. That's the big signal.
That's the main event in excitable cells like neurons and muscle cells. If a depolarization stimulus is strong enough to reach a certain threshold voltage,
Yeah.
it triggers a massive rapid opening of voltage-gated sodium channels. Sodium floods in, causing a huge brief depolarization, the spike of the action potential. It's a self-propagating signal that travels down the nerve or muscle fiber.
Wow. Okay, so we've built the cell, powered it, made it communicate electrically. Now, how do these cells organize into tissues? There are about 200 different cell types.
Roughly, yeah. All arising from a single fertilized egg through differentiation. This involves turning specific genes on or off, and that pattern is remembered by the cell memory. Stem cells in some tissues allow for regeneration.
And these differentiated cells form the 4 main tissue types.
Correct. Epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue.
Let's start with epithelial. Covers and lines things.
Exactly. Covers body surfaces, lines cavities, forms glands. Key features. Cells are tightly packed. They always have a distinct top, apical, and bottom basal surface. They sit on a basement membrane, and they are avascular.
No blood vessels. How do they get nutrients?
They rely completely on diffusion from the underlying connective tissue, and those tight connections between cells are vital.
What kind of connections?
Three main types. Tight junctions act like seals, preventing leakage between cells. Think the lining of the bladder. Adhering junctions provide strong mechanical attachments like spot welds, and gap junctions are actual channels connecting the cytoplasm of adjacent cells.
Channels for communication.
Yes. They allow ions and small molecules to pass directly between cells. Super important for coordinated function, like in heart muscle, where they allow the electrical signal to spread rapidly.
Okay, and connective tissue, you said it's the most common.
By far, its main role is to connect, bind, support, and fill spaces. What makes it unique is that its cells are usually scattered within a large amount of extracellular matrix, or ECM.
The cells make the matrix.
Exactly. The ECM is this complex mesh of protein fibers and ground substance produced by the connective tissue cells themselves, like fibroblasts. It determines the tissue's properties.
And there are different types.
Lots. Loose connective tissue, adipose, fat tissue, dense connective tissue, like tendons and ligaments, and specialized types like cartilage, bone, and even blood. The ECM is key to all of them.
Makes sense. Moving on to muscle tissue. Its job is contraction.
Purely contraction, driven by the interaction of two main protein filaments, actin, thin filaments, and myosin, thick filaments.
Three types here too, right? Skeletal, cardiac, smooth.
Right. Skeletal muscle attaches to bones. It's striated, looks striped because actin and myosin are highly organized into sarcomeres. It's under voluntary control, and its cells are large and multinucleated.
Cardiac muscle.
Heart only. Heart only. Also striated, but it's involuntary. Cardiac muscle cells are connected by special junctions called intercalated discs, which contain both adhering junctions for strength and gap junctions for electrical coupling. That's crucial for the coordinated heartbeat.
And smooth muscle.
No stripes.
No striations, hence smooth. Found in the walls of hollow organs, blood vessels, airways. It's involuntary.
Yeah.
Its contraction mechanism is a bit different. It uses calmodulin to sense calcium, not troponin like striated muscle.
Okay. And finally, nervous tissue. The communication network.
The body's command and control. Two main cell types. Neurons, which are the excitable cells that generate and transmit nerve impulses, action potentials.
The wires.
Kinda, yeah. They have a cell body, dendrites to receive signals, and an axon to send signals. And then you have the glial cells.
The support crew.
Absolutely. They support, protect, and nourish the neurons. Examples include astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, and Schwann cells, which make the myelin sheath, and microglia, the immune cells of the CNS. Communication happens at synapses.
Okay, wow. We've gone from inside the nucleus all the way out to the four major tissues. That was a lot.
It really covers the fundamentals.
Yeah.
The key thing to remember is how integrated it all is. The cell is this intricate machine, right? Organelles doing specific jobs, the nucleus controlling it all.
But its function, its survival, depends completely on managing its boundary. That cell membrane controlling transport and communication, and on efficient energy production, mostly aerobic. Any glitch, any breakdown in these systems. A faulty enzyme like in Tay-Sachs, a bad ion channel in cystic fibrosis, a failing Na plus K plus pump. That's where pathophysiology begins.
That really ties it together, the cellular basis for disease. We definitely built that foundation today. Now, thinking about what we covered, glucose needs that co-transport system with sodium, which depends on the pump.
Secondary active transport.
Right. And lipid-soluble stuff, like you mentioned alcohol or maybe certain toxins, just diffuses right across the membrane almost instantly.
Yeah, down its concentration gradient. Doesn't need a transporter if it's lipophilic enough.
So here's something to think about. Given how critical that sodium gradient is, maintained by the pump, powering so many other transport systems, what actually happens at that very initial moment when a lipid-soluble toxin floods across the membrane? It instantly changes the internal environment, potentially disrupting those carefully balanced concentration gradients that everything else relies on. What does that immediate disruption do to the cell's electrical state and all the secondary transport systems before the cell even tries to compensate?
That's a really good question. That initial shock to the system, the sudden change in gradients before any response kicks in, that probably explains a lot about acute cellular injury from certain poisons or drugs. It
Huh.
hits multiple systems almost simultaneously just by being there.
Definitely something to mull over as you dig deeper into specific diseases. An excellent place to wrap up.
Agreed, we covered the essentials.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the cell and tissues. We hope this foundational map helps. We'll catch you next time.